Welcome everyone to MailFuzz TV. I am Peter and today I'm going to be talking about the Pitt Season 2 Episode 10. It is 4 p.m, spoilers for the episode, and this is a Patreon sponsored review, so thank you very much to Alison for making the pick. The water park incident was what we ended with the cliffhanger last episode, and that did not disappoint and given us some gnarly cases, including a severed leg, which our boy Ogilvy is... Ogilvy, I can always say his name wrong. For some reason I have my brain wrapping around his name is not working. But yeah, Ogilvy is presented with a leg. Here's her leg. It was a funny moment. There was a lot of funny moments in this episode, which is impressive, given how heavy a lot of the episode is in terms of character beats. I think a lot of characters got like a big moment or two this episode. Some of whom I've been feeling like hadn't been getting a lot of moments recently. Samira being the main one, where I felt like she'd been kind of put to the side for most of the season. And they'd been setting up that her mother had been calling her, but it kind of comes to a head this episode, and she actually gets some big sequences. And there's a lot going on here. And there's some disgusting stuff. There's a finger that's degloved, so we got more of that. We got cameras up noses and all sorts. So where shall I start? Because I feel like I should tackle it by characters rather than medical cases. They'll just kind of come up as we go. But I will start, I guess, with Robbie. I mean, he is the central figure after all, and he's darting in and out of lots of little things. He overhears Langdon really caring about Louis' funeral arrangements at one point, for example, and Dana points that out. Did you hear all that? Kind of saying, hey, maybe you should give him a break. He's trying really hard. He cares about things. But I guess the bigger thing with Robbie, I should probably talk about Robbie and Samira, because I feel like the biggest thing with Robbie this episode is how he treats Samira once her thing happens. And her thing is that she keeps getting called by her mother to the point where she starts getting visibly very frustrated and telling people to leave her alone and not, Princess comes and says, hey, your mum's on the phone again. She's like, not now, I'm with a patient. And then she has a panic attack. And, we really draw it out. We watch her kind of try and get away from everyone. We get the whole sound going away, and we just hear people asking her questions out in the waiting room as she's clearly starting to keel over and struggle to breathe. And it's Joy, who was with her, who recognized that something was happening, sort of came out with a wheelchair. And Samira tries to say she doesn't need it and she's okay. And Joy's get in the effing chair. So Joy is continuing to sort of show her weight in gold here, or value in gold, as she really is been there to save the day in multiple little ways throughout the course of the season. And it was really fun seeing the reaction of Robbie, who's in the middle of another thing, right? He's in the trauma room doing some other stuff, and they come in and say, hey, Dr. Robbie, we need your help. Samira might be having a heart attack. And he's like, what? No one was expecting one of the other doctors to be having a medical crisis. Although it probably happens once in a while. I mean, they're at work all day. I mean, lots of people have a medical issue whilst they're at work. It's just a bit more ironic when it's a doctor in the ER, I suppose. But it turns out to be a panic attack. They do some tests and whatever. But Robbie's reaction when he realizes this is not a physical thing, that this is, she's not dehydrated, she's not, whatever else, all the usual suspects, it's not that. It becomes clear that it's the pressure, and he gets visibly annoyed and says, wait, you had a panic attack because of mummy issues, and tells her to go home and that she's a liability, and kind of storms out. Now, this was a very interesting sequence because it was especially harsh, right? Which obviously shows that he's quite stressed right now as well, and he's especially cruel here in the way he does this. Notably to the fact that everyone else in the room who sees or hears at least some of this, if not all of it, all have a look in their face that thinks, oh, he was kind of out of line there. Including Joy, who's the young rookie who maybe isn't as experienced, but even she's like, that feels like it was a bit too far. But it's especially interesting with Robbie because he had a panic attack last season. That was very much a big part of his character last season. So I think there's a few different ways to kind of talk about this or read this moment, other than just that he's stressed and he can't deal with someone else having this issue and he's been unsympathetic. But I would say that up front, there's maybe almost a projection thing here that it's because this happened to him and he had to fight through it, it's making him extra cruel. Is it, well, I've got like the most stress ever. I've had tons of panic attacks. I'm panicked up to the gills, and I still get the job done. So get back on your feet and, you know, deal with patience. Although he says go home rather, but you know what I mean. Like that kind of idea of like, well, I managed to operate with all this stress, so you should have to too. Boo-hoo, kind of thing. I think that's one way to read it, and I think that's, you know, an interesting way to read it. That it is more of this kind of, you know, rather than have sympathy because he's went through the same thing, he is chastising that he's been able to fight through it, so she should have to too. Even though he is like building up to this stupid cross-country trip that everyone thinks is a bad idea, seems unhealthy. Even his motorbike buddy that comes in this episode thinks it's a stupid idea, at least for him to leave after a 12-hour shift. So everything's pointing to that direction. So there's definitely this sense of like him just trying to get to the finish line and call it quits in one way or another. I think the other way to read it though, and this is perhaps little bit more nuanced, but there is almost this sort of way he talks about the mummy issues and like, oh, your personal shit's getting in the way of work. It's almost like he sees this as different from his issues because his issues were more related to patience, right? His panic attack was about someone he lost on the job, and that was everything that he went through with that. Where she's having a panic attack about, you know, her personal life kind of thing. And the reason why I thought of this even, because I honestly don't think I would have even, this would have occurred to me to read it this way, of like him having almost like a bias about what's causing it, and he can't be sympathetic because it's not about the patients and the work, is because I think there is actually more of a parallel between the two characters here than perhaps I was initially thinking. Because it occurred to me that the big thing at the end of season 1 for Samira was that she was a workaholic and was criticized. It may have been Cassie or someone else who was talking to her about not having a romantic life or a personal life, and she's like, oh no, I'm focusing on my career, this is what it is. And her whole thing was just that she was, you know, work was her only thing. Like she focused all of her time and effort on work and didn't leave time outside for anything else, and that was going to be unhealthy in the long run. And she seems to have learned her lesson a little bit from that. There's even a reference in this episode to you know, when someone says, oh, is that a boyfriend calling? And she says, oh, I wish, it's my mother. So at the very least, she's recognizing that she's kind of left, you know, there was that line about her eggs dying last episode. So she's kind of like noticing and recognizing that maybe she has let another side of her life flounder a little bit, and she wants to do something about it. But I think there is a very good argument here that Robbie is guilty of this, and that Robbie's almost the sign, the cautionary tale of what you become if this is all you care about and have is your work in this context of being an ER doctor. Because his friend that we meet this episode, we find out that, you know, they're not actually necessarily old childhood friends or anything like that. It's more kind of like, you know, they've not known each other for that long. Right, and they've kind of bonded over him wanting to help fix up the bike and stuff and whatnot. But it doesn't sound like, oh, this is like an old timey friend that he's known for like since his high school days or his college days or anything like that. It kind of feels like this has all Robbie has had and is focused entirely on work, and maybe that little slip there of seeing personal issues as lesser than like his doctor related issues. He sees that as lesser in some ways because he doesn't necessarily have the personal issues in the same way. Sure, I'm like, you know, yes, he's got a partner right now, but it's someone from work that he's having some kind of casual fling with, right? I'm not saying he doesn't do anything outside of work, but I wonder if there's almost like an attitude of like, you shouldn't be letting the outside world or your personal life interfere with what's going on here. You know, because the last season he had kind of this surrogate son, right, from a previous relationship. He wasn't even still dating that, you know, that kid's mother, but he was still kind of this friend with this kid, and that relationship seemed to have ended after the big incident in season 1. I don't know if that's mended since then. I mean, he's definitely, when he was asked about him by, I think it was Langdon on the helipad, he kind of brushed it off as quickly as possible. It didn't feel like he's still in a good place with him. So, you know, if at the very least, even if it's not always been the case, it feels like, you know, he has like focused in on work, and to the point where maybe he's realized he does have to do something else, and it's kind of bubbled into this like big ultimatum of like leaving on this trip and maybe never coming back, or possibly something else. And that gets into, of course, the moment with Abbott last episode as well, where the insinuation that things might get dark, and maybe he's not planning on returning in a much more grim way than even just, you know, never coming back to work here. So I thought that was a really fascinating little moment of his reaction to Samira's thing. Although I do appreciate the fallout from it as well, that Dr. Al takes him aside and says, what the hell was that with Samira? What the hell's going on? Like, she, you know, like, you're her, you know, boss, and she's clearly struggling with something, and you chastised her instead of trying to help her through what was going on. That wasn't the exact wording, but it was something to that effect. And, you know, he does very quickly realize, oh, I probably shouldn't have, right? It's not like it takes that much convincing for him to see, because he isn't a horrible person. He does realize, oh, I probably did completely act like a dick. Because obviously when he acted like a dick to Langdon in season 1, it was a lot more justified. It was like, oh no, he's done something to really betray professional trust here. This isn't that. This is someone struggling in a very human way, and him just not having the patience for it in the moment. So, you know, he does apologize to her, and it's kind of nice that if this is the last he speaks to her, he did at least have that, and she is seemingly thankful for it when he does come to apologize. So I like that moment quite a bit. But yeah, we're still teasing all these things, and like I said, his motorbike buddy, when they're checking him out, who gets, by the way, fast tracked because he knows Robbie. He's considered a VIP. It's a little bit, I don't know, I would call it corrupt, but it's like, oh, you get to skip the line because I know who you are. It's just a little bit funny to me, but you know, Werker looks very concerned when even he's like, yeah, it sounds a bit stupid doing a big drive, like as soon the second you're done with like a 12-hour shift. Maybe wait until the morning after a good night's sleep or something. It was kind of an interesting point for even him to make. It's almost like Robbie's been propping this guy up as the one person who's supportive of his motorbike trip, and even he's immediately critical of some of the decisions that Robbie's making in regards to it. Is quite interesting as well. So let's talk about one of the favorite subjects to talk about on this show, and that is Santos. And this was a very big episode for Santos, because she is once again kind of in a position where she has to work with Langdon on one or more of the water park casualties. And clearly there's some tension here, and that's fine, right? And I think, because, you know, to be fair, I don't think I ever blame Santos for having mixed feelings about Langdon given what happened on her first day. And even Langdon didn't act amazingly when she did first accuse him or try to, you know, report him. But the way she acts in this episode was kind of her turned up to 11. It's like all the little things that I think we've been noticing since basically season 1, but it's been especially poignant in season 2, is her attitude with people and how she feels when something, you know, when she feels something should be done a certain way, and her attitude when someone disagrees with her, or even like kind of justifies why she's wrong, or justifies why it's not the way as she thinks it should be. And her dismissive attitude is kind of abrasive, you know, maybe even a little bit in a sort of, I don't know. I'm trying to find the right words here, because I think it's a nuanced character. I think it's a nuanced situation they're in. But I think this episode, she does go cross the line into just flat out unlikable and unprofessional behavior at a certain point, where they're in the situation where they're working on this guy, and not only does her little comments get to the point where even the patient's noticing there's some tension, like even asks about it, is there a problem here, which is a really, really bad sign, but, you know, Langdon just tries to do what he does with the others, right? He just kind of like asks questions, and Santos gets immediately almost offended of like, wait, that's like a first year question or a second year question, like, why are you asking me that? And gets really catty whenever he like says, and now do this and now do that. And what was so weird to me about it is that we've seen in past episodes, and I remember this in season 1 more so than this season, because obviously Robbie and Langdon have not, you know, been the same this season, but even Langdon, I remember explaining things and answering questions to Robbie, even though he's obviously much higher up the food chain. I remember Samira doing that. I remember Cassie doing that. there's a constant idea of you should keep learning and keep kind of like going over the things we know, because there's so many stupid little different things that could be wrong with a human body, and so many procedures and so many things to do, that they're constantly like, no, re-upping the information, proving that we all know it and keep each other straight and that kind of thing. It's kind of been the vibe since episode 1 of the show, is that even people who are much further up the food chain and aren't students anymore still occasionally sort of justify what they're doing to Robbie or whoever else, right? It's been a constant thing. But Santos takes it as like a personal attack of her like knowledge of her skills, and gets very sarcastic with them, and is constantly sarcastic. And when she suggests something and Langdon says, no, we'll do this thing for this reason instead, you know, she has this look in her face of, I like, oh, can you believe this guy? And it was very satisfying, honestly, that Dr. Al, who's in the room, very quickly, like, agrees with Langdon and like sort of says, no, he's right for this reason or whatever. Like, she kind of backs him up, and that just makes Santos look more annoyed. And it's like, look, I get that you've got a problem with Langdon still. I can accept that to some point, that you're never going to be best friends. That's okay, right? The history is maybe too weird to ever be best friends. But the way that she reacts every single time he, you know, says we'll do it this way, and she happens to not agree with that, and then furthermore looks more annoyed when Al agrees with him, or more importantly, like a scene or two later, when Garcia comes in and agrees with him, and Garcia even just flat out kind of shoots her down at one point, kind of recognizing, like, it's very clear that Garcia knows how she feels about Langdon, and is like seeing, like witnessing the unprofessionalism and the little comments and looks and the attitude, and shoots it down very quickly, to a point where Santos like goes to Garcia and asks if they're okay, like, are we okay, because you're taking his side, kind of thing. Like, that's not the exact line she says, but like that's the vibe of the scene. And Garcia makes it clear that no, like, I took his side because he was right, because I agreed with his medical opinion, and says, look, are you still on this Langdon thing? Look, like, we're okay, but like, I can't talk about this Langdon thing again. If you want to talk about Langdon again, you need to go to a therapist, because this shit, like, he went through the process, he admitted what he did, he went to rehab, whatever, and he's back, and he's not going anywhere. And it's very interesting to me that Santos gets frustrated and says he shouldn't be here, he should have been fired, because I think that very much ties into a couple of other moments she's had this season, where she's been frustrated that, like, oh, like, we should definitely do this because this guy's definitely guilty of something, and it turned out he wasn't. Or more specifically, the one where, oh, they're going to have to, like, social services are going to have to look into this brother and sister, and she's like, oh, they shouldn't have to do that because they'll just break them up. This is not the same. Like, she has these very strong opinions, and they're not necessarily coming from a bad place, but whenever she does feel strongly about something, if she is in any way contradicted, or the thing she thinks should be happening isn't exactly what's happening, she has a very hard time processing with it and like coming to either a compromise or understanding with why the decision's being made. And that's not to say that every decision being made always does have an understanding element. Sometimes it is just bad or corrupt or like a shitty reason. But a lot of the ones that she's been presented with this season have not been that, I would say. And I think that, you know, the fact that Garcia, her, you know, kind of girlfriend, it's unclear. Are they officially a couple, just a casual thing? Who knows at this point? But the fact that she's the one saying, no, like, you got to get over this. He's back. He did what he was supposed to do. He's went through the process. And for Santos to kind of just get pissed about it and say he should have been fired. I don't know. It just, again, it feels like she's got this very narrow, uncompromising view of everything. And while a lot of those views tend to be from a well-meaning place, Garcia, I think, hits a really strong note when she says, because Santos says, oh, not only was he not fired, I have felt like a pariah for the last 10 months, ever since, you know, I did the right thing. And Garcia kind of shuts that down by saying, no, if you feel like a pariah, it's because you don't work well with others. It's because you don't play with them properly. This is your personality that's the problem. This is not anything. No, I don't think anyone is holding a grudge against you for turning in Langdon for what he did. And to be honest, I don't think we, the audience, have seen any evidence that anyone feels untowards her or like is off-putting with her because of that. I think there's little bits of friction with certain characters because, you know, from episode 1, she's been giving out these nicknames. I don't think Javadi likes her very much for that reason, and so on and so on. But none of it's got anything to do with what she did with Langdon. I don't think so. Maybe people might have been miffed the first couple of days where they felt understaffed or something, but nothing this season has given me the impression that anyone looks at her like she's the bad guy for that. But she's making herself look like the bad guy with the way she's acting in front of patients, at the very least. Like, it's one thing having the attitude just talking to Langdon if they happen to be one-on-one, but in front of the patients, where the patients are even sitting up and saying, hey, is there like is there some problems here that we should be addressing before you start cutting into me? I would really like to clear that up. So it does feel like this episode was very much like whether or not she's going to accept the wake-up call, I don't know. But I think Dr. Al backing Langdon up, but then especially Garcia backing Langdon up and the decisions he's making. And, like, you could argue, like, I don't think he was being, like, spiteful with the way he was trying to talk to her in front of the patient. I really don't think he was trying to, like, push her buttons. Like, I feel like some people might try and argue that he is intentionally trying to push her. I don't know if I was getting that impression. I think he was going, like, I don't know how to talk to her because of the tension, so I'm just going to default to, like, strict, this is how I talk to the younger doctors and, like, how we do things in the hospital. It felt like he was going by the book to a fault, like, almost because he doesn't know what else to do with her, so he's just sticking to the script, so he's not at fault in any way. Arguably to the point where he's like, no, I'm going to be so by the letter of the law as to how I conduct myself around here so I'm never in trouble again, almost. So, no, I think it was very fascinating watching this storyline play out this episode. And like all those scenes with Santos, like, you know, with especially Garcia, but like all of them played very well. Just quickly, we also meet the Shark, who's the other surgeon who comes down to check out the severed leg. Apparently this is Lou Ferrigno's son, and he is a bigger dick than Garcia, because Garcia, I mean, I like Garcia, but she is very, like, she comes down and snipes some comments, and actually she's a big shot in front of the ER doctors, and it feels like relatively in good fun. Like, she interacts with them much better than Santos does, despite the fact that she's at face value a bigger dick to them. It just, you know, it's more of a friendly thing. The Shark is much worse. He like poor Whitaker was scared of this man, and was like, anytime he said anything, the Shark was biting on his words, and just, yeah, it was a whole thing. So I just wanted to mention that. Langdon, since we're just talking about him quite heavily anyway, has a little bit more with Mel's sister, Becca, I think her sister's name is. And basically, you know, he's very nice to her again, keeps her calm, and gives her some medication. And the subject comes up, though, of telling Mel what's going on, because Mel's at the deposition right now, off camera. And Langdon's like, well, it's not up to me to tell her. Like, you know, I like, if you want me to tell her, if you tell me to tell her, I'll tell her what's going on. But, like, you know, patient-doctor confidentiality, that's up to you. If you want it to be between us, then it gets to stay between us. That's how this works. And that was like a fun little thing, because when Mel comes back from her deposition and the lawyer's like, oh, they were ruthless with you for no reason other than that they wanted to earn more money from insurance, you know, companies and whatnot. But it makes it clear that it's not going to affect Mel's career. She has nothing to worry about, even though Mel still looks traumatized from the whole thing. But Mel, of course, is distracted by the fact that, oh, my sister's here, so there's something wrong with her. I want to speak to Langdon. And Mel is almost like in shock when Langdon's like, well, I can't tell you because I don't know if she wants you to know. And so she goes in and she has this like shocked look in her face like the entire time. And that just escalates because she's like, well, do you want to tell Mel? And she's like, yeah, I want you to know. And so, okay, I've got this. And Mel starts saying, oh, that could be because of this. And her sister's like, I know, Dr. Langdon told me all these things. But he also said it could be from sex. And Mel sort of awkwardly goes, yeah, but you're not having sex. And her sister's like, yes, I am. And the shocked look, the adorable shocked look on Mel's face, that she has no idea that her sister is currently in a relationship, because she says she's got a boyfriend and they're having, and I quote, lots of sex. Mel, the poor girl, can't take it, and it's kind of an interesting little moment because it's kind of a mix of like her sister has more time for that kind of thing than she does, perhaps because of her job, but also just this idea that maybe she's been so obsessed with the deposition coming up that she's missed more things than normal. Maybe there was signs that something was going on. And like it's funny because her sister doesn't really like necessarily get immediately like why she's reacting that way, and he's like, "Are you okay, Mel?" Because she's staring off into space, and she's like, "Yeah, I'm fine." Like so, it was almost like a really nice, funny like relief to give her like a fun little moment after this deposition where she's been scared of it all season. So, very curious to see if Mel kind of gets her mojo back, if you will, in the coming episodes. But worth mentioning that. So let's talk about mothers, shall we? So I already touched on Samira getting calls from her mother and feeling pressured, and the mummy issues line from Robbie. But there's more mother stuff in this episode. Two in particular. One is Javadi, whose mother comes down to grill her for the mistake she made last episode. You know, for the report's not getting in time, so the surgery couldn't be done. And just comes down and just chews her out, has no sympathy, you're better than this, and it's witnessed by Mackay, Cassie, she hears it, and this is after Cassie had given her advice to maybe try and like tell her mother how she feels about the pressure, and of course this didn't, not that she even get a chance, like her mother didn't even let her speak, but she witnesses this. Robbie overhears it with Dana, and Dana's like, you should talk to her, and Robbie's like, which one? And she's like, both. So that's a funny little bit. So that, you know, again, we've got this theme of like mothers, and that this all ties in, of course, to the mother who's dying. Who I mean, this episode's like ending. The cut to black is on Mackay injecting. I think it's more morphine or something like that. Whatever it is, but it's probably going to be like the, you know, her swan song. She's going to get sleepy and maybe stop breathing with this. And there's a couple of moments throughout where she's the mum's talking to her kid. Cassie talks to the other kid who's scared to go in and talk to her, and it's a whole thing. Javadi gets emotional at one point, and what ties into her plot more specifically is when she gets upset and says she feels guilty to Cassie because, you know, their kids are losing their mother, and I like want to be as far away from mine as possible, and the kind of the duality of that feeling, and that's why Cassie gives her advice to try and talk to her about how she feels, but as we see, that does not come to fruition as of yet. I suspect there might be a scene between her and her mother that maybe hits some of this by the end of the season. It feels like they've set it up now to do something with it. But yeah, I mean, this show often is good at doing this stuff, and it's not a surprise that these moments are happening in the same episode where another character literally has a panic attack because of their mother's overbearing kind of presence in their life. And you know, it's kind of showing you the two sides of all this, and I think the scenes are effective, and I think the emotion of this. I will say though, the mother who is dying here of cancer and is seemingly maybe going to be dead, you know, at the start of the next episode, based on the way this ends, I would say that it's all very good, but I will say that every time it cut back to it, I was like, oh yeah, we're still doing this plot. It felt like maybe it's lingered an episode longer than perhaps it would have been maybe needed to be around. Having said that, the way it ties neatly thematically into these other plots about characters who do have their mothers around and are having very strenuous relationships with their mothers is interesting. So I think that's very neatly designed from that point of view. So for any other little like critiques I could throw at it, I think part of it's just because it's such a sad downer plot, and there's no like suspense or tension to it. It's very much we go back to that room, and it's more about just accepting the incoming death. So it's by its very nature a less exciting plot than the other things going on. And we got severed legs of people who don't even realize the leg's been cut off. They do a whole thing with the guy who notices actually there's tension between Santos and Langdon. He's getting his fingers degloved, and they're sort of dealing with him and any other injuries he's got. He's got like a partially collapsed lung from the fall he took. But he's worried about his son because his son was at the water park with him, and they're trying to find him. And later on in the episode, they bring in a kid via helicopter who is almost dead. Like, they have to pull off some stuff. I mean, Dr. Al pulls off like a tricky procedure that even Robbie's never done before, and it turns out she's not even done it before, and for real, she's done it like in like test dummies and stuff like that. But it's like a vertical slice of the neck, and getting some blood out, putting in a tube for the kid to breathe, and he pulls it off, and everyone's very impressed by it. It's a nice moment, and it kind of felt like Langdon and Robbie are both kind of in the same shoes there for a second, even if they don't realize it, which was kind of nice. But anyway, Dr. Al kind of came out of this episode looking quite good, actually, because she told Robbie off for how he talked to Samira, and she saved this kid's life with a fancy procedure. Like, it feels like, as I expected, there was, I think it was easy early on to see her as the replacement and see her as the one promoting the AI stuff. And I still wouldn't want the AI stuff. But I suspected that we were going to see, like her skills, like why she's in this position in the first place, why she's considered good at what she does. And I think this episode was a good example of that. And especially when she talked to Robbie, I really liked the line she had. Where he said something, someone, can't hack it if they don't have the I can't remember what the exact line was, but he said something about if she doesn't have this, she can't, be on an ER floor or something. And Dr. Al responded with, so you want to teach people that, or, she kind of responded with, so you want people who don't have any empathy either, kind of thing. It was like a really nice like hit back to what he said. It was like, no, empathy and caring for the patients is important. Which also means caring about the other doctors as well. So I really liked her stuff in this episode. She came off looking really, really good as a character here. So that stuff was all good as well. So yeah, it's a fun. It's one of the stronger episodes of the season. Honestly, it might not quite measure up to the Louis death episode and the sort of the nurse focused. Well, I think that was the same episode, actually, now I'm thinking about it. But, there was a couple of really great episodes, then with a couple of good episodes. I feel like this is back to being one of the great episodes. And I think part of it was because it felt like there was a lot of payoff to a lot of character stuff between Samira's panic attack, Robbie's reaction to that, and then all the stuff with Santos and Langdon. It felt like we were really getting big steps in all of those stories, aside from just, some of the cases that were happening around. As they were doing stuff. Ogilvy has like a little moment where he hands like a patient a book who says he's bored. And the patient asks like, oh, did you just have that at the ready in case anyone asks for something to do? And he's like, no, I brought a book because I thought I'd have like a slow day and I thought I'd have time to read. But he was very wrong. He has not had a second to slow down. So what I'm curious about is we're at that point now. This is episode 10 of 15, and their shift for most of the main characters should be ending in the next couple of hours, I think. So last season, some big crisis happened that meant that they all had to stay on overtime because of this tragedy. I'm not sure what happens this episode to sort of like elicit. I mean, maybe it's just we're so behind because of the cyber attack stuff and because of these other things going on and it being July 4th. Maybe that's it. Maybe it's that simple that they all end up staying a few extra hours. But there's no definitive thing yet that's like, oh no, like everyone clearly needs to be here. Like this is a big problem, main event. We have to show up and do the thing. So I don't know. It's interesting stuff though. So yeah, really good episode. It felt like it was big character moments for several characters. And I liked as well that they're flawed characters. I think sometimes it's like TV shows can present characters as too goody two shoes. So I like that Robbie is a dick this episode. I like that he lets something get to him and he's out of line and there's growth from that. And I think obviously Langdon's been very good this season, but he is making up for big mistakes he made last season. So I'm liking that other characters are all starting to kind of like have these things where it's like, yeah, they're not perfect necessarily, but they're trying, and that makes them more interesting from a character perspective. So yeah, good stuff. Unless you're just the shark, in which case you seem like you're just a dick through and through, potentially. I don't know. I'm sure he's very good at what he does. I'm sure he's great at reattaching limbs. I'm sure he's the best, which is ironic because sharks usually are the ones separating the limbs. But hey, That's my thoughts on this week's episode of The Pit. Let me know what you thought of this one in the comments below. That usual YouTube stuff, like, subscribe. You can support everything over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV or via YouTube membership if that's more convenient. But you'll get all the bonuses on Patreon for all the movie channel stuff as well. So worth having a look. Check out the movie channel, MailFuzz Movies, for all the movie podcasts. But that is me. Thank you very much for joining. I do appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?